We're talking about building automated supply chains for NaaS. So what I'd like to do is ask our panelists to come up. First panelist will be Abhi Sir, who I think you've met yesterday or the day before. He's Senior Director of Product Management, Communications Industry for Salesforce. Our second panelist is John Nolan, CEO at Sage Management. And I think many of you probably know him from AT&T. And then James Johnson, Director of Product Development Strategy from AT&T. All right. Thank you all. I did just have a couple notes, from the last couple of days. I was trying to think about, what this all means, how important is automation in the supply chain picture for NaaS. And there were a couple quotes that kind of came up through discussions that I've had with the service providers, just with various attendees. One kind of important one was automation. If you're not doing it, you're doomed. I think we can kind of all agree there, right? That was something that is just automation has to happen from the get-go. The other one talked about APIs and how advanced we've become actually deploying these APIs. And really what they were trying to tell me was these are not nice to haves, but must haves to enable carriers to integrate at scale. And I think scale is really the important part there. The ecosystems have to be back-to-back. Billing needs to be the same. SLAs around delivery experience, and still we have to contend with connectivity. But these are really important things, right? Operating at scale, doing things like service guarantees, contracts, all these different components. And the last quote that I had is, "You shall do LSO. Here is how you do LSO." And I thought that was kind of interesting when they talked about like the LSO Springboard program, trying to really push LSO out to the industry. If you can't do it, we can help you. And I thought those were some interesting points. So anyway, for our panel today, my hope is that we can discuss interactions across the supply chain that have to be in place to deliver services with less friction, and to quote Stan, in an automated, assured, and secure manner with multi-cloud consideration. So here we go. Abhi, I think we wanted to start with you. We had talked a little bit in the pre-call just about ecosystems and how that's relevant to NaaS. How in a NaaS world does supply chain involve the overall ecosystem as partners? Maybe go into what you see the ecosystem to be.
Sure. First of all, thank you. Thank you for having me here and appreciate the opportunity. So if I parse it, you said three keywords, right? NaaS, not a surprise, supply chain, and ecosystem, right? These three keywords. Let me try to tie this together. Now, in the paper that was released by MEF on the customer experience, they have listed the stakeholders that they play out there in the ecosystem of NaaS, right? But if you look at it at a high level from a role-playing perspective, they can be themed as your network and infrastructure providers, your technology providers, the application security, You have the delivery providers, the stakeholders who are doing the delivery, and the care/management of all these services. And not to forget the customer in the center, right? So when all these stakeholders, they are interacting, they are exchanging values, there are different categories of value exchange that happens between the stakeholders. Now, the exchanges could be in the product and service, like partners coming on board, deploying their products. There could be contractual or financial transactions. There would be transactions that are operational, the APIs and the different kind of operations. And most importantly, in an ecosystem, and especially with NaaS, there is an exchange around data, information, knowledge of you, right? But if you see that these exchanges span from a process perspective, from the partner onboarding, launch to order to cash processes, right? So tying this to the NaaS domain, like what is all these ecosystems and the exchanges mean for NaaS? So I'll just pick one example, one feature that was highlighted, I think, a lot during this conference was on demand, right? That's one of the key differentiators of NaaS. I would say on-demand has a derivative of self-service coming from the CRM, that on-demand automatically implies self-service. Now use the on-demand lens to look at all these processes. So you're looking at on-demand purchasing, on-demand delivery, on-demand monitoring, on-demand billing, and so on. So obviously these all tie in. What is the clue for all this? It is automation. You talked about automation and the APIs that will happen, right? Now I'll end with one particular thought is if you want to take the on-demand to the next level in the NaaS world, that we're talking about on-demand supply chain, right? Which means that the goods or the products and services will be produced on demand when the customer wants, and when the customer no longer wants, you want to take it off the shelf, right? Now, you could argue that this is not just happening for NaaS. We have quite a few car manufacturers who would produce start in the assembly line only after the customer has placed an order. But in the NaaS world, that is very important. And we have actually showcased this in a proof of concept with Salesforce, ARIA, AWS, and all, where what happens is a customer may buy the product today, and you will fulfill it also today, but you may not, and you will not start billing from today. You will bill the customer, you'll charge the customer only when the customer is using it. That may happen 1 month from now, right? So that's the additional complexity that NaaS brings in to the on-demand part. Sure. So I would say, I don't know whether I've answered your question or given more questions, but that's the way I parse this landscape, I scan the landscape.
Sure.
Yeah.
John or James, do you have any comments there?
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, so it starts off with understanding where you are today and how do you build on those capabilities to get to a NaaS infrastructure so that outside of your four walls, you start looking at the ecosystem in whole, and how do I create that same exchange with other partners in the ecosystem?
Sure. Good. So another question that came up when we were talking earlier was, what should ecosystem partners be focused on to reduce friction in buying and selling NaaS and other advanced services across automated networks? So ultimately, how do we move this forward to where actual transactions are happening? I mean, John, would you like to address that one first?
Sure. So, you know, as Abhi was speaking, it reminded me of, I've got 3 little kids at home, and they were doing their homework the other night, and they said to their mom, oh, by the way, for science, I need something tomorrow. And I heard that, and I said, you can't expect your mom at 10 o'clock at night to get that. That's poor planning on your part. You're just gonna have to go to school tomorrow without it. Sure enough, she orders it on Amazon. It was on the doorstep at 6 a.m. They went to school with it. So my kids, much like our customers, expect things now. And I don't think the industry has kept up with the technology to offer that. You know, AT&T, for instance, offers bandwidth on demand. Customers love that. But there's the ability to do that on other people's networks. Yep. And so how do you take the technology that's out there, use things like connect bases, location truth to buy smarter and speed up, you know, intelligent purchasing decisions, use the LSO APIs to be able to place an order, get order status, communicate that to customers who always want to know where things sit, and then use that as the foundation for some of this really cool stuff for customers. The Achilles heel in that, though, is in this industry, there's often a lot of disputes. We see it every day at Sage Management. It's often a source of friction and sand in the gears. And so, again, there's a technology solution out there that if you can utilize the technology, implement smart contracts that MEF is talking about, to be able to have agreement, and for those of you that aren't as old as some of us, there used to be a concept of first bill review to make sure that bills were right. So many bills fly back and forth. In a world where you implement smart contracts, you're essentially doing first bill review before it ever goes into billing at time of FOC. And so if you can do that, do away with the broken processes that lead to those billing errors, the whole industry moves more seamlessly, especially when you start doing more complex things that our customers want. So,
I would just build on that too. And I think, John, where you're going is blockchain. right? Like, so if we think of that progression of where we started with going from location availability and quoting and pricing, the end of that is, am I billing accurately, and can I really embed fidelity in those bills with things like blockchain to help reduce disputes?
You've got it.
Right. And I think there's more to blockchain than just the record of contract, right? You can attach SLAs to it.
Yes.
You can, have a metric at which to judge penalties against. Like, you can confirm a decision was made. You don't have like this disputes you talked about saying, oh, we didn't receive that service, but yes, we delivered that service, right?
Not only fewer disputes, but the human capital that's required to manage some of those mundane elements of a relationship with another carrier, you can deploy that capital elsewhere on higher value tasks.
Right.
And in some cases, there's teams of people doing that as a full-time occupation. Right. Are there other valuable things they could be doing? Absolutely.
Sure. And then, James, we talked about API implementations, and a lot of the discussion here is about that, right? What are the factors in implementation of APIs service providers and the overall ecosystem are struggling with, and where are they finding success? What have you seen?
Ooh, this is a fun one. So first off is addressing the 800-pound gorilla. It's adoption. Right? Are we getting adoption? Are we seeing adoption across the industry? Because you only get the benefit as others come on board with the standard, and we can exchange B2B, that same interaction across those APIs, all of those functions, reduction in clarifications back and forth with the orders. It does no good to be a standalone with the API if no one else is on the other end to receive it and send those same kind of requests back. So starting with implementation and adoption, how are we getting that across the industry? And then once I start getting from adoption, I think about the implementation and some of the costs associated with it. How do I get to critical mass? Who are those big players that need to be on the platform to help reach critical mass faster? The more customers that you can impact. And then subsequently, for those who maybe are in lower tiers and maybe not as willing to implement, helping them to see the value of it and maybe thinking of alternative solutions for them to get onboarded versus them having to natively adopt and deploy the APIs.
Right.
I think James hit on a very key part, where is the adoption part, right? So things that we see on the API part is one of the components which we have to do better as an industry is the discoverability of the APIs and giving the playground to the people to play it out and to see whether I need it or not. Fail fast, but you have to have that way of exposing those APIs just to discover them and then to play around before you start making your business decisions around it. So I think that's a key part for the adoption, I think.
Well, and to James's point, what's that hockey saying? Skate to where the puck is going, not where it is.
Where it is, yeah.
That's where the puck's going.
Day, right?
Headed there. You don't have to be there tomorrow, but you better know where it's going so that you can get there.
Yeah.
Because you can't address all of those day two issues unless you start with the adoption, right? So all of the things that have been discussed at the event, things like security, data integrity, you won't get to learning about those things and how do you secure that and get to scale if you never adopt. So really, I think the critical part for to answer the question is making sure that we're driving adoption.
Sure. In where you've seen successful implementations, what benefits have been realized for the end user, for the carrier partners? Maybe go into that a little bit. We need to have an incentive to do this. Operating at scale and greater revenue is certainly the goal, but what other kind of benefits have you seen, or like immediate tangible things that people have realized?
I could start.
Sure.
So I think, of course, with the API and the automation, everybody, the first thing that they are looking for is the efficiency, right? So that's another thing, that if you're automating it, how are you making it doing faster, better, and all. But I think, and I mentioned that in the previous panel, is that how do these APIs become strategic as value drivers, as for revenue generators, right? So, and in a recent connectivity report that was launched by MuleSoft, which is released every year in the connectivity report, where they found that amongst all the respondents, almost everybody is using them, APIs. There's no enterprise which doesn't use APIs, but only 30% have been able to actually use them as a strategic value drivers. And so I think there's a lot of room to be done and to make it useful for creating new business models, for entering new products. So the partner products, we see a lot of interest and work that people are using the industry APIs to get partner products onto the platform, because that is something which we see a lot happening. So I think that's one of the areas that we have to do more on using APIs for additional revenue generation.
Sure.
Yeah.
John?
In the dispute management space, I think it's an easy value proposition. If it takes you a little while to find a problem with how your supplier is billing you, and you bring it to their attention, chances are you're not recovering 100% of what you were harmed. And so there's a business case that says the money that I save by cleaning up my inventory and cleaning up those orders versus leaving on the table when you settle a dispute can help fund some of this. So it's a kind of a virtuous cycle that clean that up, you save money, no disputes between you, and that funds some of the build out.
Sure. James?
I would say it's a journey. The API journey, especially the MEF APIs that we've deployed. I'll give a shout out to one of our customers and early adopters in the audience. You know who you are. But as a part of that journey, the learnings that come along with it, and think about not just iterating on the new, but how do I make the old, the underlying BSS better to then go drive orchestration and faster cycle times and an easier transition of service for those customers is also very important. So although we're trying to build new, don't forget that it's predicated a lot of times on the old.
Right. I mean, so at this event, obviously, there are lots of service providers, lots of tech vendors, and the discussion is around automation. I mean, are all parties on board? I mean, are there any parties in the ecosystem that you think are lagging that need to be here? Or people that you would generate more customer success if they were more involved, it was easier to automate their services or integrate their services into your platforms?
I'll start. I think we're always in discussion with who are those key providers, partners in the ecosystem who can help us reach critical mass faster. And what does their roadmap and implementation look like? What does that look like in terms of volume of customers or orders that we could process in a manner that is advantageous to both sides? So I think that's ongoing.
And really kudos to Nan and the entire MEF team, because they've consciously expanded that ecosystem. So very welcoming to get more players, more critical players, into the discussion and talking about this. And that's the first step.
Right. And Abhi, I mean, Salesforce, to my recollection, hasn't always participated in this event over the last 20 years. I mean, what draws you to this event and participation and everything?
Sure. I mean, we have been coming for the last few years now, actually, and one of the main reasons we see we are very customer driven. Our customers are adopting it, so that is the first indicators. And David Fan, he's our communication industry GM. He's part of the technical advisory board, so we are heavily vested in what is happening in MEF and to bring it to our products and to our solutions. But speaking of the automation part that I'd like to add on what John and James said is, if you go back from our automation, I like to take a step back and say that yes, everybody is talking about automation on the customers. That's not a brainer. But if you think of a few years back, people used to talk about digital transformation. That was the keyword then, right? Transformation. And one of the things that we used to say is that, okay, first, you don't just transform if you have digital mess, if I may put it that way, because then garbage in is garbage out. So if you're automating garbage, then you will be having automated garbage. So before you get to automation, make sure that few things are in order. You may not have the whole house in order, but maybe a certain section or some process or some segment, you do that. Now, and in the automation, I think of AI, I don't know whether you'll be asking about that, but I'll step ahead and do it, but I don't want to think. When you think of automation and we are bringing in AI into the mix, and what we are kind of trying to do and work with our customers is do it in the flow of work. I mean, as we're thinking bringing in AI into the mix, we are saying that, okay, what does AI fit in the flow of work of automation? So they go hand in hand now.
Okay.
So that would be kind of how things are saying. Yeah.
I guess every panel has to address AI. I mean,
True.
James, and when you guys consider AI and how that gets integrated in the workflow, how does that factor in? What are you focusing on?
I think I would answer is, where is it not impacting? It's so broad in so many ways to find application for AI. I think in all areas of the business, there's either already some implementation or there's active implementation ongoing to drive benefits, because it's very useful in how we think about the future of our business. Think of how do we preserve our customers, how do we serve them better, how do we drive more volume, better profitability for the business. It's got so many uses for us, and we're early in that journey like everyone else.
Right, but even at a network operations level, I mean, that's
Absolutely.
really a huge part of it, right?
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, John, do you have any view on how this is going to affect the way that services are delivered in an automated way?
I'll just speak to our ecosystem, and you know, I believe it's what helps differentiate us compared to others who are in the similar space to us. So we see a lot of success with it.
Often at these conferences, you know, we repeat a lot of the themes and a lot of the talking points. Was there anything surprising over the last couple of days that you guys saw? I don't want to put people on the spot. Was there any like announcements or progress that we've made that you were like, wow, that's really great for this year?
I'm usually reinvigorated around the mission when I come and hear what others are doing in the ecosystem. It's not as pick and shovel in certain cases, that others are making advancements, and hopefully those threads do come together so that the ecosystem overall is what MEF is focused on. How do we all collectively get better, drive more value, and who are the people you can then connect with to help it be intentional about pulling those threads together to drive benefit on both sides.
All right.
I would just say that it's encouraging that the people that are in this room, all of you, are the evangelists for this message back within your own companies. Mm-hmm. And so whether you realize it or not, you're helping chart the course for the industry. So at some point you'll wake up 10 years from now when you're as old as I am or something, and you'll think, I was there when we were just talking about that as a concept, and now everybody's using it. And so it's exciting times.
Yeah. I mean,
for me, like James said, I think every time we come to these conferences, I go recharged. I always feel that, okay, we've got to do more. But these conferences, especially MEF, I like the intimate, close setting to meet our partners who are building solutions around MEF on top of the Salesforce platform. There are a few, everything you can see. NXU built an amazing one on Agentforce. But it is also a great, personally for me, it is a moment of gratitude to meet with many of our customers. Grateful. I see AT&T, James here, and I see Lorella, Sparkle, who were very influencers for us to get onto this MEF journey. And so we try to talk to others and to see what we're doing. It's a learning experience for me, right? So like we have been working on the standardizing the SD-WAN product model. Now, after coming here and being in several sessions, we feel that, okay, we have to do more. There are a lot more products in the overlay space that we should work on. But again, as you said, that we have to kind of prioritize. Not everything cannot be priority one. Then nothing is priority one. So I go take away from here charged and with a longer to-do list than when I came here. Yeah.
Now, I thought yesterday with some of the enterprise panels, there were some quite interesting takeaways. The one point that surprised me was the consumption of notification APIs and sort of like the ticketing that's involved in the automatic, like email is not in the workflow, right? Like that cannot be part of what you do on a day-to-day basis. I guess I had thought we were maybe a bit more advanced than maybe we are, but that was sort of one that stood out to me, saying like there's a real need, and it can't just be those organizations, right? And using AI to not just identify a fault or report a fault, but actually correct the fault before you even know what happens, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of the network investment that goes on today tries to take that into account.
Yeah, on that point, actually, there was an accelerator that I was fortunate to see. I think Juno and I, we walked by yesterday, and there was our colleague industry from Prodapt who was showing that accelerator. And I think it was Bala. If you are here, thank you for walking us through that accelerator on the notification framework.
Right.
Yeah.
We do have a couple minutes. We haven't really asked questions from the audience. Does the audience have any questions for the panel?
putting the audience on the spot.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you do, raise your hand. But just, I guess, I'm sorry?
Right here.
All right.
Everybody hear me?
Yep.
It's wonderful. And we don't need the mic. So, question to the panel. So, what are, if you're thinking from a business process automation point of view, between not only two enterprises but multiple enterprises, when you think about a data supply chain, right? So, what do you think is the path to adoption in order to get the necessary visibility across the data supply chain in order to remove the friction that currently exists, because not everybody is like AT&T and Verizon who can provide end-to-end connectivity between the sites, right?
So I think the question was, what's the path to adoption for a broader audience versus just the one-to-one relationship? And
Because you're dependent on the different legs of the activity. When you go from Singapore to London, you have multiple carriers.
so I'll answer from my perspective. So it kind of starts with a business case, and whether it's APIs that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, as we discussed, to build one-off custom APIs, whether it's a blockchain smart contract solution that you can have one-to-one relationships or leverage the technology that's out there. We've got partners like Interweave that we work with that are able to put that in a secure way onto a public blockchain. All of those things feed into the business case to prove in, because all of us have to go back and talk about why the things we learned here this week are things that our companies ought to be implementing. And so, having a good business case, having the ability to scale, so your investment is across many relationships versus a one-to-one. Those are the things that come to mind for me. I hope that answers.
And I would add to that, John, one of the things that I think is really important for us is, as you said, is we're all evangelizing the benefits, and strong conviction around should we move forward on these things, is that we're making commitments, right? Like in the scenario, if I'm going from one provider to another in order to connect those multiple locations together, there's got to be commitments along that chain to say, if it's not all natively API, at least there's a hybrid solution that part of it is, and we've got commitment from those other providers to help that someday be a reality. And that may not be all in today, tomorrow. It may take some time to get to that point in the journey, but if we've got at least hybrid solutions that will allow us to get it a little bit further, we get a lot closer to that goal over time.
Good point.
So I'd add to try to add one point on top of what you said, and I think the whole understanding when it comes to an ecosystem or a marketplace, there is no designated or defined one buyer or one seller. You'll have one buyer, but multiple sellers, right? So many other times, often you say that you don't know who the sellers are. We don't know who you're going to partner with. So when I alluded to the point of on-demand supply chain. So based on the need and the requirement, that whole marketplace or the ecosystem, which is the marketplace, you have to have that discoverability is the most important thing, is that the buyer has to know who are the sellers that they're going to go through. It cannot happen through emails or phone calls. So that, okay, I have these 100 listed people who can sell this here, and I will send it to only those 10. Now you either do it individually or you have automated AI agents doing it. That's the process that needs to happen. But then that's very overly simplifying what I'm saying. But coming back to that, once you know who are your targets, then comes the setting up the contract, as you mentioned. What can you do those in an automated way so that you don't have to go through an RFP process for every buying and selling process, right? And then setting up the SLA. So I hope we are trying to answer his question, but it again brings back a lot more questions in the sense that, okay, these are the things to be done, and we are not there yet. That's where the puck is going to be, and we have to go to that point, right?
Excellent. Good. Well, I think we're at time, but I do want to thank the panelists for your contribution. I think we learned a lot about supply chain and ecosystems, and I think there's a lot more work to be done. And I think, Abhi, when you put your to-do list, I would agree, my to-do list is much longer than when I started. So.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.